All right. So, as I'm sure you're all well aware, spring break is right around the corner. For some of us, spring break has already begun, right? On the same note, though, for some of us, spring break has already begun up here. Like, I get it. I've been a teacher. I thought about this the other day, and it's wild to me. I've taught classes now for almost 10 years. Like, I'm real close to 10 years of teaching. I was also a student for 10 years. So I remember it very well. And I know how that works. So my goal with this week was, like we said last time, start with a conversation about the paper, get you guys just thinking about how that's supposed to work. But then today, all I want to do is leave you with something written, okay? Something that the future you, I'm not saying a couple days from now, I'm saying a week and some change from now, because after you leave today, you're not going to think about this anymore. Let's be honest with ourselves, okay? I want you to leave here today with something written that you can find in a week and a half and go, oh, there's that, and you have a start, okay? That's all I want. Like an honest to God, I had some thoughts that week, I put them down on paper. Thanks past me, okay? That's what we're going to aim for today. To that end, I wanted to start with an illustration. Now, I have started grading your second papers. I'm about a fourth of the way done because I have 4 classes. But I've noticed an issue, and I want to highlight it now. 2 issues we can actually talk about real quick. Number 1, hopefully this one is easy. Let's talk about MLA real quick. 10 of your 100 possible points on a paper come from things like formatting and length, okay? So it's not a lot, but it's also a goofy place to lose points. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to set this up. This is our paper we're working on right now. It's 3 to 4 pages. What do we need to do for MLA? How do we set this up? Sure. Just describe it.
Little name, professor.
Okay, yeah, on the first page. Your name, my name, the class, and the date. Only goes on the first page, is not a part of the header, even though it's called a header. Because if you do that, it'll show up on every page. I've seen a couple people do that. It's kind of funny. Yeah? What else?
Page number.
Page number and last name. Good, your last name. Goes right here. If you're not sure how to do that, you can Google it, I promise you. Yes, sir?
And I guess you have to center line the title.
Good. You need a title?
Yeah.
We haven't talked about it this semester. I think I mentioned it at one point. If we ever get to a point where we're talking about titles, that's because you guys are crushing it. That means we have nothing else to talk about, right? I would love to teach you about titles one day. There is some thought that should go into it. But for right now, it's 11:01. I'll just take something. Just give me some kind of title other than rough draft. You all right? Okay, I thought you were trying to like sneak out. I was like, you can just go. What else do we need? We need one other thing, ideally. Comes at the end of the paper. Works cited. Now, I've mentioned this before. We'll put it right here because I know what I'm going to do here in a minute. We haven't talked about this in class yet, again, because we just have much bigger issues to deal with. But I still want you guys attempting a works cited page. So on the first and second paper, even if it's super wrong, the works cited page, as long as you have one, I'm going to give you credit for it, okay? Some of you don't even have one. I just want you to take a shot, okay? Works cited, centered, your entry right here. In the case of this paper, we'll actually have multiple entries, okay? It'll basically look like that, okay? Now what the rest of the paper is going to look like, and this is the other issue I've seen, I just want to cover it really quickly. Say that's your introduction, okay, and you have a body paragraph. You have another body paragraph. You have another body paragraph. You have another one. And then your conclusion kind of ends up on that 4th page. What are we looking at? Intro and conclusion, and then 1, 2, 3 to 4 body paragraphs. I made these kind of short because some of you have kind of short body paragraphs. Hi there. But in the grand scheme, you could have 3 body paragraphs if they're longer. Either way, you end up on that 4th page. Curtis, you're a ninja. That's 3 to 4 pages. Some of you are under the misconception that 3 pages means you're like right here. That's not 3 pages. That's 2 pages. 3 pages is down here. Or over here. You lose points for that. Not a lot, but it's a goofy way to lose points. Help yourself out. All right. Anyway, at the end of all this, all of our papers will more or less look like that. And I like to put it on the board here at the beginning because when you spell it out, we got a month to do it. You can all do that. We can make that happen, right? All right. Before I forget, let me note our latecomers. Curtis ninjas his way in. It's hard with the mask. Fred?
Right.
You're Fred. Cool. All right. What I want to do now, I guess I'll erase this first. I want to talk about how you might even go about starting your paper. Okay? I mentioned this last time. Much of what you're going to work with, you can't do yet because you're going to have to do some research, right? Hopefully you have some ideas at this point. Hopefully you even might have some arguments. That's great. But until you go and do some real research, find some sources that you think you can work with, most of your paper is in the ether. You just can't really envision it, right? Because you don't know what you're going to find. But at this stage, again, hopefully, you have a pretty firm idea of the text you're going to study. So the class example we gave was Ansari, and that awful night he had with the Grace woman, and the kind of blow up when they put out the article, you know, all that stuff. This part is no different, okay, from the other papers we've written. You still have to introduce your text. I told you last time we don't have like a book on this, okay? But your text is whatever you're studying. So in our case, as a class, right, the example I gave you, our text is the conversation around what Ansari was alleged to have done, okay? So we have to introduce that. I'm going to ballpark it and say 4 to 5 sentences. We have to sum up what he's alleged to have done, what happened as a result of that. That's how we're going to start our paper, okay? So I'm going to ask now, if you're going to sum that up, where do you start, do you think? In the case of Ansari, and this Grace woman, where do you start that off, the summary of all that? Yeah.
I would assume the date,
That's not a bad spot.
and then you could lead into like what all happened after that.
Yeah.
Came back to it.
I feel like we got 2 options here. One of them is the Babe.net article published in, I think it's January of 2019, with allegations, blah, 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 right? So, allegations emerged from an article published on Babe.net. You know, Ansari apparently, something like that. Okay. The other place we could start, I think this is a fine one. The other option would be actually before that, in 2018, Ansari, you know, went out one night with a woman, and you kind of get into a little bit about how that night was alleged to have gone. If you were to start here, you would still have to go here. This would be your second sentence now, right? These allegations came to light in January of 2019 from a Babe.net article, right? Something like that. Either way, you got to start early. I keep saying our text is the conversation, and it is, so it isn't strictly about these things, but we have to set up that conversation. Do you see what I mean? So to understand what comes after this in terms of the reaction, okay, we got to know a little bit about what people are reacting to. To give you another example, we brought up Potato Head last time. Still makes me laugh. If you're going to write that paper, and you could, you would first, probably in at least a sentence or two, have to set up what people are even upset about. You know? Since, I'm guessing, but you could look this up, since probably the 1960s or something, Mr. Potato Head, blah, 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 everybody kind of knows what that is, right? Sentence about that. However, in 2021, the company decided no more with the Mr. and Mrs. We're just going to have Potato Head. And now in your third sentence, just like we have here, the controversy. Or potato. But in this case, this is all of our setup, all right? I told you 4 to 5 sentences, max, absolute max. If we have 2, that means we got 3 more tops. How do we now start summing up that conversation, do you think? What are some points we absolutely need to hit?
The interactions between them.
Do what?
The interactions between them.
Between who?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you would do that here. He went on a date that didn't go well. I'm being a little bit diplomatic, okay? You would tell us about that. You would maybe even go further here. The woman, Grace, a pseudonym, alleged that Ansari's behavior constituted sexual misconduct, maybe even sexual abuse. She felt violated, right? You could do that in this sentence. Again, because this is where we're talking about sort of the event, whatever it is. In this case, we're talking about Ansari. The other example I gave was Potato Head. If you wanted to talk about flat earthers, give me 2 sentences that sums up their dumbass ideas, right? Something like that to begin with. I gotta be careful. I had a student in one class told me he wasn't sure the moon landing happened, and I was like, okay. All right, man. If I accidentally insult someone by saying something is dumb, I do not mean to. But, Jesus. Anyway, you would sum that up here, right? So we could get that information. Say we have that. These are notes, so I don't have it on the board. How do we start talking about the reaction to that information? Like, Ansari apparently did all kinds of not great stuff to this woman, right? And she didn't feel good about it. She said she left crying. She told him the next day. He apologized. People had opinions. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was raising my hand.
Do it now.
I wasn't raising my hand.
Dog.
I'm sorry.
You just sit like this. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of go into the article and how it spread to the public and a lot of the public's opinions and arguments over it.
Okay. Let's get, because again, we only have 2 or 3 sentences after this, right? Let's get to what some of those opinions were. How would you guys describe them? Because again, we're just summing them up. We have a very short space to make this happen. What were some of those opinions from some of those videos we watched?
That he was totally in the wrong and that he should be
He did what?
that he was totally in the wrong, that he should be canceled, and there was something of her that it was her fault and that she should have not, like, she should have been more clear or something like that. Like, they were
Okay.
on both sides.
So what you're saying is initially, and we can even start there, okay? Initially, right? People came down on one of 2 sides. Either they thought Ansari was a creep, to put it mildly, or this Grace woman, like that, again, I always think of that news anchor in that video we watched, who's pointing at the camera, like super aggressively, and saying like, you had a bad date, you didn't say anything, that's on you. Like, she keeps, that's really the 2 camps people kind of fell into when it first came out. Okay, that's a sentence. About after that, what do you guys think? And again, keep in mind, I'm saying 4 to 5 sentences max. We could potentially end it here, but I'm saying you got more room. You should try to use it. We can at least have one more sentence. What else do we need to try to make sure the reader knows to get a really clear picture of this conversation? Yeah.
That's when you like lead into what the point of the paper is, where you can say that, you know, what it says about people instead of how they like, I don't know, pick one side instead of seeing the bigger picture and leaving these people alone.
Okay. So that other video we watched from the woman at the Washington Post.
That's where you lead into the point of the paper.
Okay. And there's different ways to do that. So what you're kind of getting at the bottom of all of this, is that magical thesis, okay? But again, to get there, I would say what would help you perhaps, because, all right, I'm gonna spell all this out. I do a lot of talking in my head. I should spell it out for you. This is our introduction of the text. These 3, 4, potentially even 5 sentences, we're introducing the text. Does anybody remember what comes after that in an introduction? Thesis is at the very end. Introduction to the text is first. Between those is something.
Roadmap.
Good. What you're kind of describing is a little bit muddying of the waters, right? And you can kind of do that. You can kind of bleed from your summary, your introduction of the text, into a roadmap, right? Another idea, however, there's a better way to say that at the beginning, but some people also pointed out that as awful as this information was, it seemed more of a private matter, and really what we should be talking about is the larger issues this event raises, right? Around gender roles and sexual stereotypes and how we view each other, like all that stuff. And from there, you're absolutely now getting into what you think any of this says about us, right? And again, just to bring it back, you could do the same thing with Potato Head. A little bit of history of Mr. Potato Head. Maybe kind of how it started to change. We no longer call it Mr. or Mrs. People are super pissed about it. On the one hand, people are like, yeah, let's stop gendering plastic potatoes. On the other hand, people are like, this is politically correct, blah, blah, blah. You know, you've heard that stuff. You have the internet. And then after all that, why the fuck are people fighting about this? Why has it turned into a thing? What does it say about us that it has, right? That's going to get you into eventually your thesis. But one point I want to make for you, and again, this is the part you can't know yet. I phrased it as another idea. Because the rest of your roadmap is going to allow you to do a little bit of thinking about whatever you might come into contact with when you're performing research. Okay? So I'm going to sum all this up, because again, I'm not a great note taker. Everything we did to here, that's information you're going to have probably right now, if you know what text you're writing about, okay? You may not have it completely formulated in your head yet, but I would hope, if you've chosen a text, you can tell me what happened and how people reacted to it, generally, in 3 to 5 sentences, right? That's all we're saying is the first part. Everything after that is stuff you don't have. You're going to have to do some research to figure that out, okay? And then at the bottom of all of that is your thesis. The one other thing I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to have you do a little bit of writing. For right now, again, I think you can do all this. I also think right now you can write for me what's called a pre-research thesis, all right? It's like a working thesis, but a little more specific. I believe, all of you, when you write this information down, when you organize it, and you kind of step back and think about it for a second, you can arrive at some kind of an argument, right? What does all this say about us as people, a society, a culture, okay? The reason it's called a pre-research thesis is going to do two things for you. Number one, it's going to give you a great start to your research. If you have an argument in mind, we can go research perspectives, opinions in relation to that argument, right? That gives you a kind of lighthouse, a direction to head in. But it's important that you keep in mind it's pre-research. Many, if not all of you, will perform said research, think about this stuff for a couple weeks. And at the end of all that, you will probably change your mind. Not maybe completely, but your ideals will get more specific, or you'll realize you've missed something that now you're like, oh, that's really important. I gotta make sure that's in there, right? That sort of thing. So this will change. Does that make some sense? Okay. What I want you to try now, I'm gonna legit give you 10 minutes. You're gonna think that's a long time, and then some of you are not when I tell you 10 minutes has been up. I want you to do this part. Whatever event, controversy, movement, group, whatever it is that you're thinking about writing about right now, 3 to 5 sentences, I want you to take your best shot at summing it up. Yes, ma'am.
So my topic is, it's not well, it could be. It's called Super Straight. Have you heard of it?
Super straight?
Yes.
No.
It's a new sexuality
Sure. We got a lot of those.
that cis males will not date anyone who is not biologically a female, state a female, and identifies as a female, and can have kids, or can't have kids. They won't date them.
Okay.
Am I allowed to write on that?
Yeah. I mean, I have thoughts on it, but for right now, because we're going to share some of these, okay? For right now, yeah, but I want you to take your best shot at, you basically just in 2 sentences summed up the thing, right? So you had your start. And then the other 2 to 3 sentences would be, I would assume people are upset by that.
Yeah.
And some people are like, yeah, and other people, you know. So yeah, now go do this. So 10 minutes. Go. Anyway, all right. In my notes it says not everyone has to share, and I'm going to maintain that. However, there's only 6 of you, so you probably all could if you wanted to. But I'm going to start with you, just because I'm wildly curious. I read a little thing about it, so I have a better idea. But in however many sentences you came up with, 3, 4, 5, something like that, could you, and I'm going to take some notes, so go ahead and share with us.
So a new sexuality called Super Straights was invented in February of 2021. Their sexuality is basically not dating anyone who is not biologically female or male, not dating anyone who is transgender, and not dating anyone who can't produce children. Do you want to keep going, or do you want me to?
Slow down 1 second, sorry.
You're good.
I didn't see anything about children, but I only read one quick article. Okay.
Some people agree with the sexuality, saying they felt oppressed before making up this sexuality.
All right.
The majority of the people feel as if this is a slap in the face to the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah, specifically I saw people were saying it's transphobic.
Yeah, I was getting to that.
Oh, okay.
As people do more research, they found out that the neo-Nazis have created this new sexuality to divide people more than we already are.
Yeah.
And this new sexuality is honestly just transphobia in disguise.
All right. That's pretty good. Yeah, the thing I found, all right, so first of all, let's break it down how we broke down the Ansari business. Your first 2 sentences, whether you meant to or not, pretty much did the thing we talked about, right? Like you just summed up what the idea or event is, right?
Yeah.
In 2021, this happened, this is basically how it works, type of thing.
The only reason I added in male is just because I'm not sure if any females identify as super straight. I've only seen males, so I just
Yeah.
want to exclude just in case. But for
Yeah.
the most part, it's mostly males. Like, I'm super straight, and if
Yeah.
you can't produce children for me, get out of my way.
Yeah. Well, I think in the article I read, and I had to gloss it because I was doing it while I was doing other things. Especially that phrasing, if you can't do that for me, like it's an exchange, like it's a, you know, like you owe me children sort of thing, like I'm collecting them, is troubling. But, so we did a really good job of that, and then the next 2-3 sentences, what have you, is getting into what that conversation is, right? Like what it looks like. As you point out, the people that, I guess you say agree, the people that basically identify, right, as super straight, quote unquote, feel somehow oppressed. I have questions about that. Basically, we could be a little more specific here, but we'll come back to that. Rather than in the next sentence, again, you said something about how the people that don't agree basically feel like this is somehow an attack on LGBTQ people or perspectives or things like that. Again, I think because we don't have a lot of space, I go ahead and get as specific as you can and say the people on the other side see this as a transphobic. I wanted to say plot. That feels strong, but like a transphobic
Retaliation?
trend.
I mean, yeah, it is a sad trend.
I mean, it is, yeah. Something like, I mean, you'd have to play with the word, but something like that, I think, gets a little quicker to what you're trying to say anyway.
Yeah.
And to me, that allows you more room in the very last sentence to say maybe part of the sort of complication here, which is, yeah, and I saw this in the article, like, I'll tell you what, like if this last sentence didn't exist, okay? This is a thing people thought of, this is kind of how they define it, this is why they say that they came up with it, and this is kind of the retort to that. There's enough there to talk about the conversation, okay? When you add in that not the people, I mean, according to the article I read, that there's like a dude that came up with this who says he's not involved with this shit at all, right? But then once these people got hold of it, I don't know if you guys know what 4chan is. I'm sure parts of it are fine, but a lot of it is like monsters. Nerdy monsters, but monsters. Anyway, basically a bunch of trolls got a hold of it, of the term, and decided, like, specifically, we're gonna use it to fuck with people, LGBTQ people specifically. And that's where it gets really interesting, right? So again, all I'm saying is, I got a little more specific here to give us more room to talk about this. My other question before we dive into anything else, you used the word oppressed, which I think is accurate, like given how these people are talking. We need to define, if we can, like in what way, they're basically saying, they use this term now, super straight, to point to the fact or somehow deal with the fact that they feel oppressed. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. We got to define in what way they think they're being oppressed.
Because they feel like the LGBT community is getting more recognition and that they are getting, or that they're more privileged than straight people
Okay.
over this. So they feel like people are like kind of pushing them to the back of their mind, like.
I guess that's part, like.
I had an argument with somebody and he was like, I feel oppressed because straight people, they're being forgot about. It's like we don't exist. I'm like.
Well, you got to be careful, because look, real talk. The reason that classes like this are important, and some of you don't feel this way, like right now, but I promise you, the reason classes like this are important is because people can't formulate their thoughts well. And I say it that way specifically. I was going to say they're bad speakers. That's not even accurate. They cannot, like, the reason you're supposed to read is because you all have beliefs, right? Like, how do you define the kind of person you are? It's based on your thoughts and your beliefs. Now, what do you do if your vocabulary is shit? Well, that means You're gonna have a harder time defining the kind of person you are, right? So that guy, I assume it was a guy because,
Sadly.
yeah. But that person, maybe they really feel that way, but I would play devil's advocate a little bit and say, he just couldn't do a great job of putting into words what he was trying to say. He should read a book. But anyway.
Someone told him that in the comment section.
Do what?
Someone told him to read.
Well, I mean, but that a lot of people are that way. But anyway, maybe that's part of it. I think it's more accurate, and this is just based off the one thing I read. Like, the guy that came up with it originally, if you take him at his word, that he's not one of these folks, and he really was just trying to, he said something about how, almost like some of those people, because again, I'm trying to see it from their side. They're trying to say something like, if you're going to use a word like oppressed, they feel oppressed in that, almost like by only validating, according to them, LGBTQ perspectives, sexualities, what have you. It's almost like you're not cool, or it's not valid to be straight. You know, like that's how some of those people feel, I guess.
There's a few people who said that's how they feel, but they ended up changing their minds about the sexuality because they realized how transphobic it was.
Well, and
So
you
it's
get into the conversation. Slow down. I just want to say, before we get there, we gotta better define this. So part of it could be what that one guy said about, I've forgotten now because I already think it's stupid, but what he said about, shit, can you say?
being pushed to the back of people's
Yeah. And I mean, maybe, but I think it's more accurate because we haven't gotten to these people, right? Those people say that, okay? Before that, it's the original folks who maybe they're misguided, but they're trying to say almost like they feel like they're being knocked or insulted or somehow cut down for being straight, right? Now, whether or not that's accurate, that is how they feel, like in that, so that's all I'm saying is we want to define that a bit better. I'm just going to put like left behind. Again, there's probably a better phrasing. That's kind of the sense of it. Now, what we can do from there, we've given ourselves like a menu of options, okay? One thing we are absolutely, obviously going to have to talk about is this business, right? Those last two sentences, internet trolls and transphobia and all that madness, some of them are like posting like Nazi memes. It's like, yeah, you have to talk about that stuff. It's pretty hard not to talk about that, okay? But what's interesting to me here is there's a lot of ways you could play this, okay? And again, just so we're clear, we're using hers as an example. All of yours are going to be like this in some degree. You can't know how far this goes until you go out and find whatever research you find, right?
Right.
But the thing I read, again, if you take the guy at face value, apparently the originator of this phrase was a TikToker who, again, maybe you think he's misguided, maybe you don't, but he's just a dude like talking, like that's the video. And there's none of this. There's no like 4chan online troll, like they get a hold of it. And that's what's interesting to me. Maybe the idea itself is transphobic. I'm on the fence about that right now. But I would absolutely argue it's more innocent before it gets to these folks. Do you see what I'm saying? And I guess part of what I'm wondering is, because again, the big question we're after is, what does any of this say about us as a people, a society, a culture? It's like, I mean, one big question is it possible to have ideas these days and it not get taken from you? Like it not get changed by people once it hits the internet? Do you know what I'm saying? Because maybe this guy, you have ideas all the time, at least I hope so. And some of them are stupid. I don't know if you know that. But we're conditioned to post things online, so I mean, that's its own thing. But once you do that, is it yours anymore? It doesn't seem like it. Okay.
I think the original guy did it as a joke, so
Maybe.
I think he did it as a joke, and then the neo-Nazis got a hold of it, and then
Well, even so, like, pretend that that's the case, right? his original idea is a joke, for instance. Haha, funny. Or not. Maybe it's a transphobic joke. I mean, that's possible. But again, my point is, in a weird way, sort of like, I'm sorry, this would be one kind of conversation that the internet could have, right? We could all either laugh at that guy or call an idiot, but it wouldn't really turn into anything, right? But people nowadays, I wonder, again, this is part of my beginning of a thesis, is it even possible to do that anymore? Is it possible to have an innocent internet conversation anymore? Yeah, it kind of seems like no. It's gonna immediately get politicized. Online trolls, I guess, are gonna find it and turn it into something awful, right? Immediately. If that's true, based on your research, right? Then again, the question would be, what does that say about us? That like, we don't even allow for honest discussion. Like in a perfect world, a guy would say something like this on the internet, and he would be able to talk to people who agreed or disagreed with him, and they would kind of sort it out, right? Well, why don't you think that's a great idea for me to be saying that? You think it's transphobic, but why is that? Let's talk about it, you see what I'm saying? But as soon as these fuckers get involved, you can't actually have a conversation anymore, right? They're just going to be as awful as they can, and people are going to start yelling at each other, right? But that's what it becomes. So the two questions I would have, and this would guide my research to start with. Is it possible to just have an innocent idea online anymore? And then number two, and kind of an offshoot of that, is it possible to have a good faith discussion? Right?
Yeah.
Signs point to no.
Sometimes you can, sometimes you
Maybe. Well, and again, that may be part of your answer. If it's a yes, no, then the question is like, well, when is it yes, when is it no? Maybe if it gets super popular, the discussion, all of a sudden it becomes no. But if it's like private, if it's you and a couple friends or something, then maybe, you know what I'm saying? Like,
If the far right trolls, 4chan and the neo-Nazis don't get a hold of it, you can have a good faith discussion.
maybe.
When when the people start twisting words and try and use it for evil, that's when.
Sure. No, that's absolutely. But again, I kind of want, like, part of my hypothesis is, like, how do they find it? Do they only find it because it gets popular?
Yes.
Well, then that would suggest that it's not just them, like, they're a big part of it, but the popularity of the issue is actually what hinders it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, the more popular a thing becomes, the more people are going to find out about it, the higher likelihood some of those people are shitty, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as they get involved, they ruin everything, is my hypothesis, right? So we're basically saying, if anyone has an idea that a lot of people care about, it might be impossible to talk about it.
Like gender roles, because that's
Sure.
That's something people don't.
That's kind of wrapped up in it, right?
But that's something people don't like to talk about either, and it's a big discussion.
And you kind of, I mean, again, so in a similar way, the question would be like, can you even online? And it's like, well, maybe not, right?
Right.
So it's almost like although, because I love an although statement for a thesis, although the internet is obviously almost a perfect engine for connecting people, for starting mega conversations. Like if you wanted to, right now you could participate in some larger conversation on Twitter or pick your social media that thousands or potentially millions of people are involved in, right? Like you could get involved in that too if you wanted to. But it's an although statement, so comma, although that's true, it's that same mechanism of popular conversation that seems to drown out good faith discussion, seems to almost, I mean, again, this is pre-research thesis, but it almost seems to make, you use the word evil, which is very strong, but make the bad faith voices louder, right? Drown out the good faith ones, which is a bummer. But maybe, right? That would be my pre-research thesis. And now, I'm not just looking up stuff associated with this, which I absolutely am, right? But I could potentially try to look up sources, because there got to be ones out there that think about whether or not it's even possible to talk about this kind of thing online. Do you know what I mean? Got to be out there. People have thought about this. You have your hand up? I can't tell. Okay, good. Did that make sense? Sometimes I ask you guys to come into my brain with me. Like, does that make enough sense? Okay. Oh, what time is it? Let's do one more. I won't write it on the board. We'll be quicker about it. Somebody else want to share? It's very interesting. I like when you guys bring me things I've never heard about. Is your hand up? I can't tell. Okay. You feel you're not sure about it?
No, you go. Yeah, go ahead.
I know I already said this when we were brainstorming Monday.
Okay.
The whole idea is much deeper than this. I was talking about the Holocaust deniers, but not just that.
Okay.
I was more going into like I was talking about how like with anything, with any horrible event throughout history, people,
Yeah.
even though we have so much evidence of it,
Yeah.
people will deny it either. They'll deny it, just like you said something about their agenda, and I was like, yeah, they would deny it for the sole purpose of, like, they would just deny blatant history, just to support their own thing.
Yeah. Okay. How did you try to sum that up?
I was more just talking about in my introduction, but I was thinking about this more last night, just more about how, I guess people are willing to go to such great extents just to, like, the more radically ideas, the more, like, it just causes way more division. It's like people purposely want to be divided for a reason. They want to belong to a place. That's why.
Sure. We'll come to that. What did you write a summary for us?
I didn't finish because it was like,
I told you 10 minutes would go fast. Read us what you have. We'll talk about it.
Okay, I wrote the kind of introduction. I have to do anyway, whatever. I'll say, in today's world, you cannot say its name without images of internment camps and mass killings popping inside listeners' heads, the genocide.
Slow down with your chest.
The genocide of millions of Jews and multiple others in the Holocaust have been burned into many of our minds so that we may never forget what happened those years from 1941 to 1945. There are survivors' buildings, documents, and countless other pieces of evidence that are linked to the event. However, even with all this said, there are many who still deny its existence. Throughout history, we have seen the atrocities that many individuals and groups have performed. Many of these were taught in schools so that we will remember. And that's the question. I was like, but it's strange that it may seem people willing to deny these blatant examples of the horrors of the world. Why? I said, why would someone claim something so horrible and evident to be false?
Okay.
And I was going to lead into
Part of your issue. Keep in mind, and look, you're all going to have different issues, but some of you will have this one. This is only a 3 to 4 page paper. You don't have the real estate, okay? That's why I don't normally give you hard and fast rules, but the 3 to 5 sentences at the top of your paper to sum up the conversation, I kind of mean it. Like, and you're pushing that right now. Your issue, you could lose some of those sentences immediately, because you even said in your preamble to your summary, right, that, yeah, you want to talk about Holocaust deniers, but that got you thinking about all the people that worked that way. That's true. But 2 things you got to keep in mind. Number 1, that's on the reader to make that connection at the top of your paper, right?
Yeah.
You're not here to talk about it. You don't have the room to talk about all that, okay? Number 2, if you want to do what's called gesturing outward, like all the stuff I talked about in my paper, you can also think about these other sort of related ideas. That's what your conclusion is for.
Yes, I was gonna kind of go into that. I was gonna talk about how, you know, people wanna blame it on one side, but in reality, there are extreme left wings and extreme right wings that
Sure.
that both deny.
Well, again, some of that material you could maybe get into in your conclusion. That's where you've made your argument, and now you're saying you can think about this too. But for our purposes, I mean, it seems like most of your material still wants to talk about Holocaust deniers. Okay, what you are going to do in your paper, at least right now, is think about Holocaust deniers in 2021.
Yes.
Okay?
Not-
Not
Not the old ones. 'Cause I know
they've been denying it since it happened.
And I was gonna also say like how many people think it was the Nazis, but in reality, it's actually like way more like even the QAnon people, like even they deny it.
Sure. Yeah, I guess you want to be, you have to focus as much as you can, I suppose. Okay? But anyway, your first two sentences, you did a pretty good job. You brought up the thing itself, you described what it is in those first two sentences. I think you kind of started going off the rails around sentence number 3. Just like this, sentence number 3, let's get to, if you want to be super boilerplate about it, the people that think it happened, which is most of us. You could bring up, it depends, but you could bring up the fact that, because I always like to play devil's advocate a little bit. This is a nice way to at least seem objective. We don't have hard numbers, right? We know a lot of people died, and we know it was fucking awful in all kinds of ways, because weirdly, the Germans are great record keepers, which is horrific when you think about what they're keeping records of, but not all of them were saved. It was a war, so like some of that stuff is lost. So you could say most people agree the Holocaust happened. Not everyone can agree necessarily on all the numbers and blah, 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 but we all generally say, yeah, that was a thing. That's your third sentence. Your fourth sentence, you have 2 left. So these last 2 are, however, there's a growing contingent of people online who dismiss these claims, not just because people are unsure about some of the particulars, but they dismiss all of them. Like, I'm using my memory here, but I think most of those folks think it's like a conspiracy somehow, that like somebody somewhere said the Holocaust happened to accomplish something else. Is that right? What is this something else? I'm asking.
I was trying to read on that, and
Is different things, I guess?
yeah, there's people.
That's interesting.
Weird, freaky.
Sure. Well, it's like, I know some of these then. Yeah, there's like lizard people that run the world. I'm not making that up. One of my newest favorite ones is that the fires in California last year were started by Jewish space lasers.
It was started by a gender reveal.
Jewish space lasers. Sorry. That's what these people would say. Like this Jewish organization has satellites. I love that I'm recording this. Has satellites that with lasers in it, because
That makes sense.
yeah. But we cover it up with it was a gender reveal thing. You get the point. Sorry, we're off the rails a little bit, but the third would be, generally we agree. The last 2 would be the folks who don't see it that way, don't, for a whole host of reasons. Like already you're kind of saying, the people that say we've got it wrong with our history books can't agree on what they think it really happened, right?
Yeah.
You're already pointing to something interesting. And you could have fun. You could list a couple. Lizard people would have to be in there. Jewish cabals, which is like a secret society, You have a nice little list there of what they think it was. And then the last sentence would be, I think, where we absolutely have to push it into the modern day. What does this nonsense look like on Twitter, or look like just on the internet, I mean on Reddit or 4chan is really what we're talking about. How does it manifest itself online? Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead.
And then just like with her topic, the whole, like how you could, like, well, maybe some people feel this way, some people feel this way.
Yeah.
this and that. Like, there's so many things you could, I was thinking there's a lot of different ways you can go at it, like, you know, you feel like some people just are just that crazy and they want
Well-
to not like stuff, or they just want to cause division, or they want to be different. It's also-
Yeah, although best case scenario, we work to theorize, hypothesize, do our best to define a little bit better than just bitches be crazy, right? Like, so for
Well,
instance,
of course, I'm saying there's lots of different ones. But,
yeah, well, like, because and again, you can, part of your research, I mean, it'd be very different, although maybe kind of related actually, but pretty different from what she's talking about. It'd be like, plenty has been written on why people believe conspiracy theories, because that's a very old subject, right? One of the prevailing theories is it makes you feel important, right? Like,
you're in charge, like authoritative figure.
well, I mean, but think about how we define authority. Like, not even, I mean, in some cases, authority over others, but what I'm saying is authority over yourself. Like, consider this. If you live in a world where a thing like the Holocaust happened, okay? Millions and millions and millions of people killed. Not everyone in Germany even wanted that. The Nazi Party had a majority rule, I guess, but like 30-40% of Germans were like, this is a bad idea. But if you're in the 30-40% in Nazi Germany, are you going to speak up? No. Or same shit's going to happen to you, right? So if you live in a world where you accept that things like that can happen, where even a lot of the people in that country don't want it to happen, what you're accepting is maybe you don't have as much control over your life as you would like to think, right? Isn't that part of shit like that? Well, one of the theories would be, with this particular conspiracy theory, is I have more say over my life than that. That didn't really happen, right? I know what happened. And you're kind of, the subtext there to yourself is that I am the master of my own fate. I understand the machinations that are going on behind the scenes, and I can govern myself accordingly, right? That's one theory. There's others, but that's one of the big ones. And again, it's a question of authority, but we can define it even better still. You'll see a similar thing. I love, man, there's books on these people. Doomsday Preppers, have you guys heard of these folks? You may even know some. If you don't know what it is, it's the idea that some kind of apocalypse will soon come. Not necessarily biblical, but like, we're so decadent and depraved as a society that pretty soon it's all gonna fall apart, you know? So these folks are prepping for like the World War Z type world that will exist after that, right? They got bomb shelters. Some of them have communities like out in the mountains that they either live at or they're gonna go to when it goes down. And there's generators there and water filtration and all this kind of stuff. And again, what is the fundamental idea under that? Well, one of them is you are the master of your own fate. Not only do you feel like you know what's going to happen, which is pretty big. I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow. I have ideas, but my wife has ideas too. You know, like I'm not the master of my own house. But along with that, you're the master of your own fate and you can manage it, right, in the future. You have control over your life. To think otherwise, like, that makes us uncomfortable. I think that undergirds a lot of, weirdly, what you're getting at. Most of us don't like to really face the idea that we live in a world where people can do awful shit like that and there's nothing we can really do about it. Right? I hate to end class on that note, but that's kind of where we're at. And again, just to bring it all back together, you guys have two very different texts, right? So your arguments, your research, everything like that, two very different directions. Maybe related, you know, a little bit, but pretty different for the most part. That's what it's going to look like for all of us, right? The beginnings of your papers will more or less function the same. You're trying to get me into the topic, and then you're trying to give me a snapshot of the conversation, okay? The rest of this, you're gonna, if you have ideas or just questions for yourself, write those down, man. Get those down before the end of today. Because I promise you, when you leave for spring break, whether you physically go somewhere or just mentally, you will leave this class behind, okay? Whatever ideas you have in the next 12 hours, write them down. Text them to a buddy, do something. Keep track, because your future self is going to want those. Do you have any questions for me? I figured not. Let me double check. I don't think we have. Oh, when you get back from spring break, and I'm telling you now, maybe set an alarm. I don't know. You got to figure this part out, because I know you're not going to check your emails, so there's no point in me sending them to you. When we get back, that week is bib week, right? I believe 2 are due Monday, and then 2 are due that Wednesday. These are your annotated bibs. We talked about the prompt. I think it was last time, or maybe even the time before that. These are your sources. You're going to need this for your papers. You want to do that. Maybe the Sunday you get back, or whatever. Or maybe you do 2 before you go, right? Today is Wednesday, for God's sake. But I'll leave that to you. All right, whatever you do, be safe. Not everyone is going to be, if you catch my drift. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in a while. Thank you.